of the Southampton Town Board to order on this 9th day of December, 2021. Please rise if you're able and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's remain standing. We'll do just a brief moment of silence. I don't normally do this at the work sessions, but former Senator Bob Dole is lying in state. So let's, in his honor, they're doing the funeral, I believe, right now. So why don't we pause together for a brief moment of silence in his memory. All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman,
Present.
Councilwoman Lofstad,
Here.
Councilman Martell,
Here.
Councilman Bouvier,
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
All right. So we're going to start this meeting. Well, maybe we'll start with an update. Let me see this. Ryan, oh, Ryan's on there. Maybe we'll do that first before we do the draft agenda. I know it looks like I'm sitting at my normal seat at Town Hall in our meeting room, but it is a virtual background. We still are here via Zoom. So it's just sort of a reminder that the pandemic hasn't gone away. In fact, it's sort of creeping back a little bit with the Delta variant. Of course, there's questions about Omicron, but what we're seeing primarily is Delta cases on the surge. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and Ryan, who's been our COVID coordinator, is also our director of public safety, will give us a brief update.
Thanks, Supervisor. Yes, as you indicated, the numbers continue to increase. Our most recent daily average numbers based on the statistics from the Suffolk County Department of Health are about 23 to 24 people, new positives per day within the town of Southampton. The county, as of about 24 hours ago, when I looked at the numbers, the county of Suffolk is seeing about 499 or so new positives per day. And I think the big headline today, or the discussion on people's minds, is that the Long Island as a whole, but certainly Suffolk County more close to home, is seeing a positivity rate of about 6.2%. For the county, and that's obviously not where we want to be. In the past, when we had the old yellow, orange, red zone type categorizations, 6% would have gotten anybody classified as a red zone. And so we're above that. We're actually, I believe red zone status under that old system was about 5%. And I think, yellow was like 2.5 as the start of the zoning, and then it worked its way up. So we're above what would have even been classified as, red zone status before. I don't think that it's terribly surprising. It's disappointing to see the increase, but I don't think that it's terribly surprising. Unfortunately, we've all been, dealing with this for about 2 years now. And so we've seen some of these trends already, that when we come around, holiday times, when people tend to gather more with friends and family, we see increases. So I'm not necessarily surprised to see these numbers going up, but it's disappointing because we'd love to see it staying at either a flat line or, decreasing. I think there have been some questions about whether or not to implement different measures or take certain, additional safety protocols similar to what we saw from the state back earlier in the pandemic. It's certainly something that we look at, and we've been continuously encouraging the messaging about safety precautions that people can take. Obviously, the most important one of the strategies that people can take to try and stop the spread of COVID is vaccination. And vaccination is quite widely available, although, I know people are experiencing some wait time to schedule out booster shots, but it's nothing like what I think we saw at the beginning of the pandemic, where you might have gotten an appointment, 3 months out. I think that by and large, people are seeing success, and it might be, a couple of weeks before they can get something, but it's not like they're waiting 3 or 4 months to get a scheduled shot. The vaccination has been expanded and made available to, all people 5 years old and up. And so we're at a point now where the majority of the population is eligible for vaccination and should consider, doing so as the best possible mechanism to avoid any serious impacts from COVID and to try and stop the spread of COVID. We're at about 24 positives per day. I just spoke to the hospital earlier. They're at 10 as their COVID census today, and that's elevated significantly compared to where we had been at one point in time. Thankfully, none of those 10 are in ICU today. They've been fluctuating anywhere from, I think, based on conversations I've had with the hospital emergency management, anywhere from, maybe 3, 4 people in their COVID census at a good time to up into this, 8 to 10 range when it's a little bit busier and they have more COVID patients. Thankfully, when we ask about the numbers, many times we're hearing that of the COVID patients that they have at the hospital, and none of them are in ICU. Just the other day, at the end of last week, when I met with the hospital, they did have a couple in ICU, but now we're back to none in ICU. So I think that what you're seeing there is people, it's a mixture of people, and this is what they've been telling us too, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, that are going in, and the people that end up in ICU tend to be the unvaccinated individuals. We do see people that have gone and gotten the vaccine that end up with COVID. We know that can occur just the same way I mentioned at the last board meeting. It's just like the flu shot. For years people have been getting flu shots, and that you still might get the flu, but you might not experience the same severity of the flu. So, you get the COVID vaccine, you might still get COVID, but even if you do go to the hospital, in all likelihood, you're not going to end up in ICU. You're not going to be in there with a vent on you because you're at that degree of severe symptoms. So, just because the vaccine doesn't stop someone from getting COVID shouldn't be a deterrent to individuals from getting the vaccine. You should be looking at this from the perspective of, is this going to keep me out of the hospital? Or if I by chance end up having to go to the hospital, is this going to keep me from having to be on a ventilator and be in ICU? That's what you should be looking at this and saying to yourself when you're trying to make the decision. If you're one of the individuals out there that's a straggler, trying to make that decision that has some hesitancy on it, consider what effects you might experience if you don't go the vaccine route and you do get COVID. So overall, it's not necessarily a picture that we'd like to see right now with the numbers going up. Suffolk County, 499 people a day. Of that, we represent 24 people. We're like 0.04% of the total number in the county. So I don't know that we are really a hot spot of spread in the county of Suffolk here in the town of Southampton. And that's I guess, happy news. To have 10 people that are COVID positive patients in Southampton Hospital right now is not happy news. It's not a big hospital. You're talking about, 100 beds. So to have 10% of the people in the hospital as COVID patients, that's not a number we like. So hopefully we'll see that number go back down. But my sneaking suspicion is that with holidays still upon us and gatherings still occurring, we're going to see that number stay close to the same for a little while longer now, as we did previously. in terms of trying to implement any kind of restrictions within the town of Southampton, we look at that on a regular basis and we consider it. There are some concerns with doing so more widely than at specific events. I know we're considering, some restrictions and extra checking on, vaccination or testing status for any kind of like social events that the town may host. But to more broadly implement certain restrictions, if we are the only place that's doing so, and first of all, we have to remember we don't have a health department. The county of Suffolk has a health department. So any special restrictions would be nice to come on the advice of the Suffolk County Health Department, and would be best served if they were more broadly spread about the county in terms of, whether it's a new mask mandate or anything like that. We would struggle if we were the only town implementing something, to be a little island of special restrictions in the midst of a sea that didn't have it, wouldn't work so well for necessarily stopping the spread or doing much for us. And we saw with yellow, red, orange zones in the past that it actually had kind of a negative economic impact on things too. Obviously, health and safety are much greater concerns than any economic impacts that we might experience. But certainly something to consider. If you go back to the old yellow, orange, red zone system, we had restaurants, for example, within the town of Southampton, or within a zip code that was classified as a yellow zone, that then were not allowed to have more than 4 or 5 people at a table. But if you simply went, a half a mile away and crossed the zip code line into a non-classified zone, you could still have 10 people at a table. So when a family had to decide where they were going out to a dinner, they said, well, I can drive a half a mile and I'll go to the place where I can have 10 people at the table, because that's where I want to have my family gathering. And I can only have 4 here in this yellow zone. So one of the things we look at when we consider the possibility of implementing things like that is, are we going to be the only ones? Is it going to drive people out of our area? Is it going to be successful? If you can go all over the rest of the county or the island and not have to necessarily wear a mask in the same fashion or do this or do that, and then you just happen to come back into the town, you've still been exposed to things all over the place in other places. So if there are going to be any changes, it would be best served if the changes were more broadly implemented, either as the whole state, if we're seeing an increase, or in the county in a more broad fashion if we're seeing increases within the county of Suffolk. So we're looking at it, and I'm in communication with my counterparts at Suffolk County OEM to see if there is any consideration from the Department of Health about implementing any kind of additional changes. I have not heard anything up until this point, but we're constantly evaluating the situation. And what we would do right now is just continue to encourage people to get vaccinated if they have not been, to get the booster if they are due to receive that, to make sure that they maintain high levels of immunity. And then to take precaution when in any kind of gathering situations, if able to maintain social distancing, do so. If you don't feel well, get tested. Testing is pretty widely available. Even if you have a couple of day turnaround on a test, rapids are pretty widely available. PCRs, there's a more demand right now because people are gathering and want to be sure about their statuses. So you may need to allocate a couple of days in order for the results to come in. But there's also at-home tests too that you can get your hands on at a lot of the pharmacies. If you think you have a cold, make sure it's a cold. Consider getting tested if you're going to go to a family or a friend gathering and you're going to be around a lot of people. Don't be the cause of COVID spreading around amongst those that you care about. It's just behaving in a safe and smart way is probably the best thing that people can do right now to try and help stop the spread. This is not new to us. And it's the same messaging everybody's been hearing for quite some time. We just need them to kind of heed the words of caution and actually follow it.
Right. Anybody have any questions for Ryan? That was very thorough.
Thank you, Ryan. I had asked Ryan to give a little broader perspective on what was going on. We've had a lot of questions from our constituents about it, so I appreciate you bringing us up to date, Ryan.
Ryan, on the restaurants, and I'm always concerned about their ability to survive when people don't want to go out. But are we continuing to relax the outdoor dining so that they,
Yes.
people who feel like sitting outside, I know it's December,
Yeah.
but places have heaters, they have igloos and things like that.
Yeah.
So
We've had some changes in viewpoints and stuff like that within our office here in public safety and in the fire marshal's office. We've examined some different heater options that in the past weren't really on the table for some of our businesses, and many of them have taken advantage of it, and we're allowing those types of things to happen as long as it's done and installed in a way that's safe and isn't going to tip over or burn people. And we extended out the outdoor dining capabilities through to the end of the year to make sure that people had that option available to them. And we're looking at options going forward for, instead of what for a long time has been more of a seasonal, permit for some of the like sidewalk dining and things. We're looking at, making those types of things year round. One thing that COVID has done is allowed people to really embrace, al fresco dining. And I think they enjoy it a lot. And with this being a La Nina year, or we're expecting some, more mild temperatures, hopefully, although I will say standing outside in front of our building today, meeting with Peter Gordiello and John Irwin, it didn't feel like a warmer day, but hopefully people can take advantage of some outdoor dining even into December now.
is there anything that, maybe this is more of a Jim Burke question perhaps, but is there anything that we need to do? Because we're not under a local emergency declaration right now. I think the last time we had a positivity rate that was this high, we were under a local emergency declaration. In terms of your ability to waive those rules, is there anything that the town board needs to do to, give you that authority to waive that rule? Obviously you said you waived it to the end of the year, but we're going to have to do it likely until, at least March. So.
I don't know that it would require, Jim, you can, chime in on this too. I don't think it would necessarily require us to do like an Article 2B declaration in order to be able to extend that out, a little bit further. It's an existing, waiver.
I don't mind doing it if we need to do it to clean things up. I'm also a little bit concerned because I think the open meetings law waiver only goes to the end of the year as well. I suspect that they'll continue that, but.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. I expect that probably the governor will be taking some further action on probably all these types of related issues. Right now, it looks like I would expect that she would extend the provisions, waiver of the open meetings law provisions, and probably give us, under the emergency powers, give us the ability to waive, or we can do our own to waive certain code provisions.
I know we have done resolutions where, because I remember in the early days, actually, not just the early days, for a good year plus, I was signing emergency orders almost constantly.
Yeah.
And then we took a couple of them and we said, you know what, let's modify the code and allow for, the town board to waive this for, a year or whatever it is, so that I wouldn't have to keep doing these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think sidewalk dining was one of those, Supervisor. I think we actually made we passed a stopgap kind of in the code. We didn't codify it to make it where like a permit went for a whole year as opposed to more seasonally. But what we did was pass a measure so that you didn't have to keep issuing a new emergency order every 5 days. We passed a stopgap measure that allowed for the fire marshal's office to extend those out in light of the pandemic conditions.
So maybe just check to see if there was an expiration date on that.
Yeah, we can
We'll yeah.
We can always extend it.
And I just want to say, Mr. Supervisor, that we appreciate your consideration of those things, because we manage the workload of the emergency orders, and I have exhausted my budget for the legal advertisements that are also associated with that, and just had to go and ask for more funding. So,
Right.
there's a lot of that goes along with it behind the scenes as well.
And to be quite honest, I unfortunately hate to have to say I don't see COVID going away anytime soon. And so to go the route of emergency orders, I think we've got some lessons learned at this point, and that's why we passed that one the one change that I referenced where it put the power within the hands of the fire marshal's office to be able to extend out some of those like sidewalk dining permits. I would rather see us maybe potentially make a couple of additional changes, and you suggested that that's something that we can definitely do, Supervisor, because we're probably going to be dealing with conditions like this for some time to come. Hopefully those numbers will go further back down again, but I don't think we're going to see a situation anytime in the near future where COVID's not going to be a concern to us. So if we need to make some changes and codify them to be able to accommodate that without having to pass emergency orders, it's probably to our advantage because we're going to be dealing with this for a while.
Yeah. There's also quite a number of places that are offering booster shots now. I just got mine yesterday at Southampton Hospital. They do Moderna on Monday and Wednesdays, and I think Pfizer on Tuesday and Thursdays. I could be wrong, but if you haven't, I think they have maybe a J&J day as well, Johnson. But I highly recommend people who are 6 months out from their vaccine get a booster. It seems like it's effective in terms of the Omicron and certainly Delta. Omicron seems right now, though it's here in Suffolk County, it seems like it might be actually slightly milder than the Delta, but we're not clear. The data is not fully analyzed. But vaccines, if you haven't got one, they are easy to get. They're available in a lot of places, including your local pharmacy, CVS, Rite Aid, those types of places are offering vaccines. And the college has vaccine, not the college, the Stony Brook, Southampton Hospital has vaccines. So, and Ryan, are we still maintaining information on our website if people go to our town website in terms of where to get vaccines?
I will double check to see whether we have a current list up there or not, but it's there, as you indicated, they're widely available. They're
Right.
just about any, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid, Bart's, any type of pharmacy that might be out there, a doctor's offices at this point, and then obviously you mentioned the hospital. There's a lot out there. So we'll double check the list, but
Yeah, if we don't have it, the county probably has it at their website. The state has information as well. So,
Sure. I had luck at the
for some
local
reason somebody
pharmacies.
doesn't know how or where to get a vaccine, they can call us and we will certainly help them find a location. All right. Thank you, Ryan.
no problem.
Ryan, I had a quick question about the term fully vaccinated. Has that changed in the state of New York to
No,
include the
no,
booster?
it hasn't.
Okay.
In fact, the first place to clarify that you didn't have to have a booster to still be considered fully vaccinated was the city just the other day. This has been a question on my mind at what point the CDC or the state or somebody was going to start to tell people that you could no longer claim fully vaccinated status if you didn't have a booster, or if it was in excess of 12 months from when you got your second shot or something like that. I expect that at some point we're going to see some sort of a more broad ruling on that, or a medically defined characterization of what fully vaccinated is, that's going to take into consideration whether or not somebody's been boosted. Because you certainly, you can't be 2 years out from your booster and still check a box, or 2 years out from your second shot and check a box that says, I'm fully vaccinated because at one point in my life I had the vaccine. It does not protect forever. So I think we'll see an update to that sometime soon, but there hasn't been anything that's come out from either the federal government or state, to my knowledge, that has changed what qualifies as fully vaccinated.
Okay, thank you.
I think they are going to update in 2 weeks the Excelsior Pass to the Excelsior Plus, I think they're calling it, that will allow you to put in your booster as well. I think the current Excelsior system does not have that. One other thing I'll mention, and it may turn out that Omicron is a little bit less severe. We don't know that yet. But COVID cases, even mild COVID cases, can have symptoms that go on for weeks. And, there is what they've been calling long haul COVID or long-term symptoms, respiratory issues, and other problems that people are having. So even a mild case can have very significant long-term impacts. So it's better to not get it for sure. And certainly to protect yourself best you can. I still know people who are anti-vaxxers. They don't believe in it. They don't want it. And it's their choice, though I would hate to see any of them get it and die from it. So I just recommend, as somebody who's been vaxxed and had a booster, if my advice means anything, please heed it. Get vaccinated. Protect yourself and the people you love. All right. Anyone else? Okay, then let's go. We're running up on the agenda against our 11:30, but I would like to get the draft out. Now, the draft is long, and it would take us a long time to read this draft. 13 public hearings and a lot of resolutions. Next year, I'm actually working on, I've never really been a fan of reading the draft agendas, and next year on our work sessions, I'd like to not do this. So let me just ask the board, are you guys comfortable not going through the draft and just giving it to Sunday to publish? And there may be a couple resolutions you want to highlight so that at least the board is aware of them. Is that okay with everybody? I'll mention a couple things, or do you want to go through it one by one?
I'm a strong supporter in going through it because we pick up things along the way that might be unforeseen, and I think that could cause more confusion than unburdening. But I would defer to the town clerk on that, because they're the ones that pick up this burden for the most part.
Burden is one of the resolutions, just ironically. All right. Well, all right. Since we have at least one councilman member who wants to go through it, why don't we go ahead and go through it? This is going to be, we'll try to go as quick as possible. It's going to be for the 14th of December. It's a meeting that'll happen 1 p.m. It'll be via Zoom. There are 13 public hearings. The first one is the Burden property. This is that property in Watermill that we'd be, potentially acquiring, expanding that Triangle Park all the way to the water there. It's an exciting prospect for creating a waterfront park in downtown Watermill. Second one is a property of Dorothea Marciak. I can't tell you exactly where that one is. The third one is the property of hearing on acquiring Michael S. Aronoff's property. This one is in Flanders. The next one is considering amending Town Code 123, building and construction as it relates to effective period of building permits. That would actually change the period for a building permit. It'll be 2 years rather than 1. The fifth hearing considers changing Chapter 123, Article 5, Energy Conservation, to modify the Hearse rating to incorporate the New York's Stretch Energy Code. We've been talking about that. Number 6 is a public hearing to consider granting a conservation. Oh, by the way, that the stretch thing is a continuation of a hearing we've already held. Number 6 is a public hearing to consider the grant of a conservation easement in connection with the application to build at 1 Albert Avenue, North Sea. The 7th hearing is accepting a deed of residual fee from Paul and Laura Calamita for property to be maintained as open space in North Sea. The 8th hearing is to consider a historic landmark designation for the Lafalot building out at 8 Studio Lane in Chinacock Hills. That's in that art colony area. Number 9, a public hearing to consider landmark designation of the property at 680 Scuttle Hole Road in Watermill. That's the Maples property. We've discussed that. Number 10 is a public hearing to amend Town Code Chapter 330-162, special exception. Table of use regulations listing self-service storage facility as a special exception use in highway business. Number 11 amends Chapter 330-5 definitions and 330-33 to define and list medical marijuana dispensary in the business districts table of use regulations and enact special exemption standards. Number 12, public hearing to amend Chapter 330-37 industrial districts table of use regulations to include physical fitness facilities as a special exemption use in LI 40 and LI 200. Number 13, public hearing for 2020 fire protection contracts. All right, any questions on public hearings? All right.
No, I want to just make a clarification for why I feel it's important to read through these is for all the other reasons, but I think for the public's edification too. I know a lot of public listen to this and look at our work sessions, reading the draft agendas. It's open government. So I just wanted to add that in to clarify my.
I understand you, but next year I have no plans to do these draft reviews at work sessions. So, I'm changing the schedule to, I think, Monday work sessions. We can discuss this, and then Tuesday we'll have the meetings. So we'll have to just circulate these agendas the week before, and you guys will have to a certain amount of time to let Sunday know any changes you want to make, and then we will publish them and the public can view them online. But let's go to the resolutions, starting with 38896 offered by Councilman Martell.
38896, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extension for repair and install sidewalks with Long Island Mason and Concrete.
Resolution ID 38895 to authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension or extensions with Bilo Industries Incorporated, Grade A Petroleum and Miles Petroleum Company Incorporated for oils, lubricant, and grease.
Town Board Resolution 38892, authorize the supervisor to amend a 5-year maintenance and support renewal agreement with Harris Govern.
Town Board Resolution 38940, authorize the supervisor to sign an application for access to Preed. ID number 38893, authorize the supervisor to sign a contract extension for utility task vehicles with Motorcycle Mall Incorporated. 38898, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extensions to furnish and deliver assorted aggregates and soil materials with Bistria Materials, Inc., Southampton Excavation and Site Development, and Benemax.
All right, sorry, I was muted. All right, 38937, authorize supervisor to sign contract with Suffolk County Water Authority to connect public water at Hot Dog Beach in East Quogue. 39027, authorize supervisor to execute a 2022 contract extension with the Rocky Smith LLP for preparation of an annual financial audit for year ending December 31st, 21. 38967, authorize the supervisor to execute a no-cost extension of term of contract with Rayner Group PE and LS, PLLC for design and permitting services connection at 20 Shinnecock Road, Hampton Bays.
Town Board Resolution 38949, authorize the supervisor to execute a renewal agreement with LK McLean Associates PC for on-call engineering services to be provided to the Highway Department for various townwide projects.
38876, authorize supervisor to execute an agreement with the Village of Quogue for town employee court appearances related to the administration and enforcement of home improvement licenses. Oh, that's great. So they're gonna use our department then for licensing, it sounds like. All right. Maybe they already do, I don't know. All right, Councilman Lobster?
ID 38975, co-sponsored with Councilman Martell, authorizes supervisor to execute an agreement with Thomson Reuters for use of the Clear Plus Web Analytics program by the town's Code Enforcement Department.
39019, authorize supervisor to execute an agreement, an amendment to the 2021 Stop DWE grant agreement with Suffolk County.
ID 39032, authorize the supervisor to execute an amendment with Jackson Dodds and Company Incorporated for invasive vegetative removal on town properties.
38939, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2022 fire protection contract with the Village of Quogue and the North End Quogue Fire Protection District. 38935, authorize the supervisor to execute a 2022 fire protection contract with the Village of Sag Harbor for the Noyak and Bay Point Fire Protection Districts. 38927, authorize the supervisor to sign grant application to Municipal Waste Reduction and Recycling Program. 38941, authorize supervisor to sign a contract extension for a community services grant agreement for the Chinacock Indian Nation Housing Assistance Program.
Town Board Resolution ID 38894, co-sponsored with Councilman Bouvier and Councilwoman Lofstad, authorize the supervisor to sign contract extension for portable toilet rentals.
All right, 39033, award and authorize supervisor to sign contract for printing of tickets, pads, and envelopes. 39028, resolution authorizing the town to enter into a management and stewardship agreement with the North Sea Maritime Center for the Tupper Boathouse. 38936, authorize the supervisor to sign a new agreement with Briscoe Protective, formerly known as Bell Ringer, for Conscience Point concession and bathroom building for 1976 North Sea Road, Southampton, New York. 38992, 2022 notice to bidders for ammunition for police department.
Town Board Resolution ID 38972, so notice to bidders for invasive vegetative control and removal. And Sunday, I'd like to be added to the Tupper Boathouse reso.
Yes.
Thank you.
Town Board Resolution ID 38970, the 2022 notice to bidders for street sweeper parts and gutter and rear brooms.
39020, reject RFP and second notice to bidders, preparation of a redevelopment plan and bid for purchase of urban renewal property located at 20 Chinacock Road, Hampton Bays, in accordance with the scenarios outlined in the town's adopted Hampton Bays Waterfront Revitalization Plan. That is the Bel Air property. 38874, amends 2021 adopted budget and authorize part-town fund pay as you go purchase for land management. 38942, amends 2021 budget for various departments. John, you're next.
Board Resolution 38957 is the notice of adoption to amend Chapter 123 Building Construction, Article 5 Energy Conservation to modify the Hearse rating standards and incorporate New York Stretch Energy Code -2020 into the town code.
All right, not subject to the hearing. 39008, it's a bond authorization, 250,000. There's a whole bunch of these, so I'll just do them quick. 250,000 for bulkhead improvements. 39007, bond authorization, again, 250,000 for drainage improvements. 39002, bond authorization 250,000 for improvements to Shinnecock Canal Maritime Park. 39000, bond authorization 250,000 for reconstruction at 112 Old Riverhead Road. 39013, bond authorization of 250,000 for townwide bridge reconstruction. 39009, bond authorization of 250,000 for townwide culverts. Don't know why these are all 250,000. So this one is 39023, bond authorization of 265,000 for waste management equipment. 39006, bond authorization of 350,000 for improvements to Speonk Shores Canal. 39024, bond authorization of 412 for improvements to Old Farm Road. 39005, bond authorization of 500,000 for beach parking upgrades. 39001, bond authorization of $1 million for improvements to Lobster Inn Marina. 39004, bond authorization of $1 million for improvements to Police Department. 39011, bond authorization of $1 million for pedestrian and traffic safety improvements. 39025, bond authorization of 1.75 million for townwide road improvements. 39003, bond authorization of 2 million for the Southampton ambulance building. And those are all the bond authorizations. They'll all require supermajority votes, roll calls as well. All
So
right.
mine were in a total different order.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it wasn't me.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out where we are.
I don't know who has.
We're on
Did we
page
do-
79.
Got it. Okay.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah,
The next one that's not a bond. Yep.
I'm on page 79 and I got 38948 by Councilman Bouvier.
Yes,
Yep.
cost reimbursement waiver for the Church of St. Rosalie's Our Lady of Guadalupe Torch Run held on December 12th, 2021 from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Resolution ID 38811, historic landmark designation for a portion of 680 Scuttle Hole Road water mill known as the Maples pursuant to Southampton Town Code Section 330-321. Town Board Resolution ID 38812, historic landmark designation for the structure known as Lafalot located at Studio Lane, Chinacock Hills at Suffolk County Tax Map as indicated pursuant to Southampton Town Code Section 330-321.
Town Board Resolution 390-2021, a memorializing resolution in support of the town of East Hampton's effort to exert local control over the East Hampton Town Airport.
Just on Councilman Schiavone on this, there's been some concern that they, although in their effort, to gain control, to provide some relief to all the people who have been suffering, that some of the decisions they might make with that control could impact other areas of Southampton. So you did include some language in this, right, to deal with that?
It is strictly supporting East Hampton Town Board to take local control of the airport. It really says just that.
I thought I saw a version that did have some language. Did you change it?
Well, what language are you referring to, Supervisor?
Well, let me just look at the resolved. We support the.
This would be as opposed to the FAA controlling what we have now. And I've been doing a number of presentations, as you know.
Right. So it just says in the resolve that we, support East Hampton's efforts to obtain local control, pledge to be a partner in developing strategies to address noise, limit flights over town of Southampton, improve compliance with minimum altitude requirements and vary flight patterns for helicopters and aircraft so that both the towns of Southampton and East Hampton can continue to ensure and protect the quality of life and natural resources of their unique communities. I guess that sort of gets into it a little bit. I just, I support them having local control, provided they use that control in a way that's respectful of both, really the whole East End.
Well, I agree. And I think that having a municipality with local control over these flights is more advantageous and more desirable than what we currently have, which is the federal FAA, which really does not listen to us or our constituents. And these are issues that have been occurring over more than a decade in the town of Southampton. So, when I see 9,056 flights in 2019 and about 8,000 of them are flying over the town of Southampton, east and west, it would be nice to have a local board to go to for redress of grievances for that, to change the flight paths.
Yeah, it's not just flight paths. They're talking about limitations on landings. They're talking about limitation on aircraft size. They're talking about curfews. So, if let's say they say that no landings after 9 o'clock, then however many flights they're seeing after 9 o'clock, and granted, some of them might come in earlier to make it before the curfew, but where will those flights go? Will they go to Gabreski and things like that? So all I'm saying is that we are at the table, that we are viewed as an affected party here. So as East Hampton makes these decisions, they are doing it mindful of whatever possible impacts they might have on the town of Southampton. So,
I also believe that East Hampton Town is going in this direction, and I believe it behooves us to support them so that we can be at that table for the decisions that they make.
right. I just want to make sure that our support is sort of conditioned on being at that table.
Are you saying that you would like to see more in this and condition it to us to have some kind of decision-making power over a neighboring jurisdiction? That'd be tough to
Never
do.
going to give us that, but all I think we can do is request that we be considered in the decision making, as they make these decisions, the impacts on our community. So you do sort of say that. You say improved upon,
Like both the towns, yeah.
you say both towns can continue to ensure and protect the quality of life and natural resources of their unique communities. So yeah, it may be sufficient.
Well,
I also
think
see this as
supervisors, the
an
discussions
extension
that we've
of
had-
our, oh, excuse me, Councilman.
No,
I see
go
this
ahead.
as an extension of resolutions that we have passed and that this board and members of this board have passed in the past, excuse me, namely 2017-318, 2017-3819, which really point to and support East Hampton Town's ability to maintain local control over this airport.
Councilman.
Yeah, the point I'd like to make is that I agree that the municipality should have control over what it wants to have control over if it can achieve that. But not knowing what that control is and the impacts that it has on the rest of the town of Southampton, it would be very nice if we at least get some concession from East Hampton that allows us to be represented at those discussions or those changes of control in order to protect the rest of the town from the very thing that we're trying to solve by supporting their ability to control their airport. And not knowing what that is, that's a little difficult. So I agree with the supervisor that we should be able to at least request a seat at the table here when they're having those discussions so that they fully understand the impacts that it has on the broader area of town of Southampton as well as the entire East End, which I'm not saying they would not consider, but it would be nice that we I think as the supervisor said, that we would be invited to the table during those discussions.
Well, everything that they do, as we do, is going to happen at public meetings. And we certainly can go as a neighboring jurisdiction and give our input. I think we all know that it's going to be very difficult for the town of East Hampton, like any municipality, to cede any of their jurisdiction to a neighboring town. But as I've amply proven to this board and the community that the town of Southampton is currently suffering under a system that exists. When I see 7,000, plus helicopters flying over the eastern part of the town in and out of East Hampton, 6,400 in the western part of the town of Southampton, like I said in our last work session, frankly, I don't see it getting any worse. And really, all of the helicopter flights have been shifted over the town of Southampton. And really, it's high time that we support the town of East Hampton taking control of their own airport over the industry group, the East End Helicopter Council, which actually does create these flight paths, and they're created over us. So I guess we can, discuss this more on Tuesday.
Well, again, the same issue comes to mind, that it's one thing to have control, but to understand what that control is and have a voice in that is important, particularly as it affects the traffic going to Gabreski and the rest of our constituencies. So, I think we should have a little bit more discussion. I think the language can be strengthened to that. I know the supervisor has, is going to have a communication with the supervisor of East Hampton to point out all those things as well. To me, having the ability to go to a public meeting is not quite the same as sitting down with the people who are making decisions that were going to be presented for public hearing. I think that's where we should be able to have a voice, or at least be invited to that, to consider the region in its entirety. So, but we can discuss this more on Tuesday, I suppose.
All right, I'm going to read the next resolution, which is 38921, accepts the resignation of the scale operator in waste management. 38888, accepts retirement of Barbara Balcom, senior office assistant in highway. 38918, accepts retirement of Daniel Morris, heavy equipment operator in highway. 38973, accepts retirement of Patrick Albe, police detective. 38817, accepts retirement of Christian LaRusso, police officer. 38887, accepts retirement of Laura Smith, principal environmental analyst in CPF. 38920, accepts retirement of Mary May Mendoza, driver messenger in human resources. So quite a number of retirements of people who we know very well and we've worked with through the years. 38989 amends the town holiday schedule. 39016 approves vacation carryover from 2021 to 2022 for CSEA members. 38998 authorized payment to Chief Skornecki. 38987 ratifies memorandum of agreement between the town and CSEA. 38977 ratifies memorandum of agreement between the town and PBA. 38980 ratifies a memorandum of agreement between the town and the SOA. Just what those three resolutions have to do with the Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, and allowing those days to be full days off rather than half days off this year, in light of the work through the pandemic that the employees have done. It's also the fact that these days are falling on Friday, allowing for a fuller weekend for those who are traveling. 38889 releases Brian Williams from the position of Ordinance Enforcement Officer in CPF. And John, you're next.
ID Resolution 38979 is a notice of public hearing to consider amending Chapter 19-5 of the Town Code, Southampton entitled Public Safety Commission Powers and Duties. Sorry, everything's sticking together here. Town Board Resolution ID 38901 is a notice of public hearing to consider amending Chapter 254 of the Town Code of Southampton entitled Peddling and Soliciting. Maybe to your point, Mr. Supervisor, if we condense these along a lot of page. I don't know what page I'm going to next.
106.
Thank you. Town Board Resolution ID 38851. So notice of public hearing to consider historic landmarks designation of the property located at 248 New Light Lane, Watermill, Suffolk County tax map as indicated on the resolution with Corwith Jones Farmhouse.
38968 is a notice of public hearing for a change of zone application entitled The Preserve at South Country Road for a change from CR 40 to multifamily planned residential district on a 17-acre parcel in order to facilitate development of 104 units of affordable rental housing in the hamlet of Quiot. That's at 6 units per acre density. And
the following Town Board Resolution 38692 and 38693, there's been an error. We actually passed this before in November, so we're going to withdraw these two. That's 38692 and 38693.
Sunday, you got that?
I do.
We'll strike those from the agenda. John, you've got the next one though.
Yes, Resolution ID 38708, accept a TDR deed of residual fee from Paul and Laura Calamita for property to be maintained as open space located at North Sea, Suffolk County tax map is indicated on the resolution pursuant to Southampton Town Code Chapter 244-4, obtaining a development rights certificate, and Chapter 247 General Municipal Law of the State of New York. Town Board Resolution ID 38757, accept a grant of conservation easement in connection with an application to build 1 Albert Avenue in North Sea.
39014 accepts the transfer of and gift of a portion of the former Nassau Council of Girl Scouts property in Hampton Bays to the Community Preservation Fund. This is that caretaker cottage. We had held the hearing, and I guess this will move it and bank the development right. And then we have some add-ons. So let me try to locate that. Here we go. We have 39040 offered by Councilman Lofstad to waive winter storage fees at Conscience Point Marina for Sea Scouts, and 39041 creates capital account for Peconic Estuary Partnership Eelgrass Restoration Viability Project from 2021 Community Preservation Fund water quality monies. That's all, folks. That's the agenda. Any questions or changes that we haven't already discussed? All right, Sunday, you are good to go with publishing.
Thank you.
All right, so back to the agenda. We will go to our 11:30 item. We're only a half an hour behind, not too bad. We're going to talk about the town's travel reimbursement policy. We're going to bring in our controller, Len Marchese, and auditor, Lisa Trentini. Let's get them into the call. We appreciate your patience, Len and Lisa.
Interesting conversation we got to listen to.
I'm glad you found us entertaining. Hopefully it'll be mutual.
This is pretty boring.
Is Lisa coming on? She is, right?
I think so. She probably wasn't standing by like I was.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Do you want to let her know, Len, or do you want to do this?
All right, I can do this. I mean, I texted us so, but I don't know.
I mean, I have a copy of it.
Yeah, so let me just, I'll give you an overview. We haven't really formalized an adopted policy for travel. We have various pieces, and a lot of times when people go travel either out of town or conferences or whatever, I just kind of use my own discretion as to what we allow, what we don't allow.
Hey,
And in
Len.
the past,
Len, Lisa's on. Charlie, 5904, if you could let it in. I apologize for the interruption. She's dialed in on a cell.
oh, okay.
There you go.
So I'll let Lisa go through it, but in general, we've in the controller's office have audited and reviewed claims, various. Sometimes I've denied things that have led to hard feelings with people. Sometimes I've allowed things depending on their circumstances. And this policy basically codifies a lot of the rules that I followed in my mind, but makes it into a town policy. This way, there's if an employee or somebody wants to challenge what I've decided, now I can just point to the policy and say, this is what it is. So it probably will clear up any discrepancies that may arise. And so that's basically what we're doing here.
All right, Lisa, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. All right, Lisa, you want to take us through what the rules are now for reimbursement for travel?
Absolutely. So these policies actually have been in place as far as an auditing standpoint. This is what I look for before reimbursing any employees for any training, conferences, or meetings. Like Glenn said, we wanted to put this together so that if someone did have a question, we could just email it to them. So they do have a clear guideline, especially with anyone new coming. So I'll go over the travel reimbursement policy. It's for employees who attend conferences, meetings, or trainings on behalf of the town. It is the department's responsibility to prepare an itemized pre-trip estimate of expenses and have an authorized and approved town board resolution before any travel accommodations can be scheduled. Accommodations include hotels or flights if needed. Sometimes, especially our police department, they will travel further than just out of the state, so they may need a flight. They are after the town board resolution is approved, there's a designated employee in each department that will make the accommodations. Speaking of police officers who may travel for work-related activities, including transfer of prisoners or picking up a town vehicle, are not required for an approved town board resolution for any travel expenses that may occur, only because those are usually done last minute and we're working with the state. The town encourages all employees to use town vehicles when traveling. Employees can be reimbursed for purchase of gas, parking, tolls, and ferry. Receipts are required for reimbursement. Any employee who does use their personal vehicle as a means of travel can be reimbursed by gas receipts or by mileage. And the mileage reimbursement rate is actually on the IRS website, and it's updated every year. So, people can always look at that. Employees who want to use the mileage reimbursement, they must fill out a form on the town's intranet, and we update that every year. And they must provide backup to show that the mileage is accurate. For example, town employees use MapQuest, and that shows how many miles it would be from the town to Albany. And if it's 300 miles, they would attach that with the form. And that's how we know that what they're saying that their mileage is actually true and accurate. Tolls and ferries and Ubers are also reimbursable as long as they're considered reasonable and they have receipts. Anyone have any questions about that part so far?
Any questions for anyone? From anyone?
Just so that you know, if any employees do use their own personal vehicle, they can either get reimbursed for the gas, using the gas receipts, or the mileage reimbursement. You can't use both, and that's also guided by the IRS. Employees can also be reimbursed for meals. There's 2 ways employees can be reimbursed. One of them, and this is all, just so that you know, this is guided by the New York State that I use and the IRS. So I'm looking at both so that we're making sure that we're actually accurate and true with other guidelines within the state. So if an employee wants to not use a receipt, that's one of them, a no receipt method. They get a prefixed rate, and they can go on the GSA.gov website, and it'll tell them, based on where the training is, how much they would get. So if they're in Albany, it would be $10 for breakfast, $12 for lunch, and $24 for dinner. And that's how much they would get reimbursed. But they would need to tell us when the training was. The other way employees can be reimbursed is by the actual cost of the meals, and that must be considered reasonable. Alcohol is not reimbursed, and they must have an itemized receipt. If there's more than one employee that is on the meal, they must have their name written down. And that's the meals. And when submitting for reimbursement, the controller's office requires that submitted within a reasonable time. All receipts are submitted with a town board resolution and with any backup needed. And it must be signed off by the department head. So like I said, there is a designated department employee who does make the accommodations for the hotel and for any flights. So that's usually taken care of before the training is done or the meeting. Anyone have any questions?
Do we, any questions for Lisa?
No, I was in the meeting where this was presented. Well done. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah, that was the Audit Advisory Committee. It was presented. I was there as well. All right, anyone else? All right, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Everything seems quite reasonable in terms of the policy. Maybe one question, is there a cap when we say reasonable, that in terms of food expense, when somebody goes out to dinner, is it reasonable up to a certain point, or is it just reasonable? Like if somebody spends $30 on dinner and say, well, that's, an entree that's what it was on the menu, or, entree and an appetizer, $30.
Reasonable would be, $30 for dinner. However, if you're ordering a porterhouse steak from a steakhouse and it's $200, I would consider that not reasonable. However, I always do go to Len if there is any questions that I may have with a reimbursement.
I thought at one point we sort of had a policy where, and I could be wrong, I might be thinking of the county policy, but where like food allowance was like $25 a day or something like that. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, that's what you got. You couldn't, if you spent over it, it was on you. But that's what was provided. There's nothing like that in this policy, right?
So we do have the prefix reimbursement, which is if you go on the GSA website, if you go to the actual town of the training, it'll tell you how much you would get reimbursed for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you can get reimbursed that way.
You can get a straight payment. And then you don't
Straight
have to.
Payment of, and you don't have to show any receipts.
You don't have to show any receipts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But there's no cap in this policy that if somebody claims, my food was $70 a day and they had the receipts, if you deem it to be reasonable, there's no upper limit, right? I know it
Well,
doesn't include
correct.
alcohol, but
Our food in Manhattan is different than food in Albany, right?
right. And alcohol is not reimbursable.
No.
Correct.
Yeah.
I know when I worked with the federal government, they just gave us stipends for a particular area based on the IRS's totals. You know, it's sort of like mileage kind of thing, but it was based on the different economies. So was that something is that what this is trying to do, essentially? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's trying to regularize reimbursements.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Makes
had some previous town employees try to submit very large steakhouse bills, which became more contentious, you know.
Okay. Understood.
Okay. All right, no other questions on that? All right, then we will move on the agenda. So the next item, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lan. The next item, we're only 13 minutes behind schedule now. We're getting caught up here. A technical review of the groundwater monitoring plan for Sabonic Golf Course. And for this conversation, we're going to invite in Jenna Shearer, our Town Planning and Development Administrator. We also have consultants, representatives for Sabonic Golf Course. We have also representatives from Suffolk County Water Authority, and we have Dr. Martin Petrovich, who's our consultant for the town, who prepares the report. So if we can get some of those folks on.
Good morning, good afternoon, Supervisor and Board. Thank you very much. I just wanted to list out, Charles, I think you know, but just in case you don't, it's Marty Petrovic, Tom Cambreri, Ty Fuller from Suffolk County Water Authority, Garrett, Paul Grosser, and Wayne Bruin for representing Sabonic.
All right, and as these folks are allowed in, Janice, so we have a condition that went with the approval of the Sabonic Golf Course Plan Development District that requires them to do sort of a comprehensive groundwater management report. And we contract out with Marty Petrovich, who I don't know if maybe paid by them or paid by us, I'm not sure. And he does is it a yearly report?
It's actually a 5-year plan, monitoring data. And
Okay.
Marty and Tom Cambreri, who is he's our hydrogeologist and water resources specialist from Sole Source Consulting. Him and Marty are our dynamic duo team that review the data and provide us with the technical independent review report that you may all remember getting. And that's what we're going to go over today. And we did this for the bridge not long ago. And now we're here with for the one for Sabonic. So
this is for the period from 2011 to 2018. Okay.
that's right.
All right.
So we're a little behind, but we are, it is, we're looking at that time period. Yes.
So, yeah, is that advisable in terms of making changes now that we're 3 years behind?
Well, I will turn it. It's really just a matter of the testing protocols. So I will, like to turn it to Marty and Tom to go through their point and discuss with it. And then, I would leave all the technical questions to them.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
All right. So let's get started then. So who's going to kick this off?
This is me, Marty Petrovic. And I just wanted to just amend that slightly, that basically there's annual reviews, which I do for the town, actually paid by Sabonic. And so I'm the town's consultant, but.
Well, Sabonic pays us into an account and we pay Marty and Tom. So they're not directly paying them, just a minor point there, sorry.
Yes. And so just a kind of a brief review, since I do these yearly ones, we had interjected that probably to have a more comprehensive, not that my annual review is not comprehensive, but a more comprehensive review every 5 years, data-wise. And so the project was originally approved in 2004, and the initial background testing started in 2005, and they've been doing testing ever since on an annual basis. And these 5-year reviews, really the purpose is to look in entirety, look at everything that's going on, from the management of the golf course to the impact on the environment, and if there is a need to make changes in their groundwater management plan that is approved by the town board. And so that's kind of where we are today, even though 2018, we have interjected, as you'll see, more recent data into that. So it's the total part of it may be through 2018, but there are parts that have been kind of showing up for in the data that allowed us to make some additional comments. So with that said, yes, I do the annual ones, but then Tom Cambereri comes in, bringing kind of a special expertise to look at it, get another independent view of all the information. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tom to kind of go through the PowerPoint presentation we have that summarizes what we found and what recommendations we would make to modify the groundwater management plan.
Thank you, Marty. Can everybody see my slide
Yes.
that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tom Cambereri, a hydrogeologist. I was a former director of the Water Resource Program at the Cape Cod Commission for over 30 years. I was first involved with assisting the town of Southampton and Marty Petrovic starting in 1998 with the development of the monitoring program at the bridge, its 5-year reviews, and subsequently getting involved with the Sabonic course. So it's been my honor to be assisting in these important, groundbreaking, real state-of-the-art monitoring programs that are part of your permitting conditions to protect the Long Island sole source aquifer. So we're today focusing on the Sabonic golf course, which is on the Sabonic neck, bordering the Peconic Bay. And if we look at these groundwater time of travel contours that were developed by the U.S. Geological Survey, because the Sabonic course is located at the perimeter of the aquifer, the groundwater travel times are fairly short, probably in the order of 10 to 15 years for groundwater at the center of the peninsula to get to the bay. That is in contrast to like the bridge course. It's located at the top of the moraine, where it takes hundreds of years for some of the groundwater to get to the north coastal waters. So the Sabonic golf course is a champion course, par 72, nearly 7,300 yards on 298 acres. If we look at how the acreage is divided up, I think you can see my cursor. There's about 65 acres of managed turf. It's 52 acres of fairway, tees, and greens, and also some of the driving range. The rest of the course, the area Sabonic is bunker areas of rough that aren't fertilized. Over 122 acres of native land that was restored from its previous development, freshwater ponds and wetlands, and about 70 acres of developed area on the peninsula. So we talked a little bit about this in our introduction. The groundwater monitoring plan was approved by the town of Southampton and Sabonic in November 2004. The sampling started in 2005. Our first 5-year technical review and updated groundwater monitoring plan occurred in 2012 to 13. Today, we are talking about the technical review that was contracted in 2019 for the years 2011 to 2018. And we submitted this report that we're pointing to there. And since we've submitted this, we have been in discussions with the Sabonic Golf Course and their consultant, Paul Grosser, about the proposed updated groundwater monitoring plan for 2021 that you will be considering for complete approval at a subsequent meeting. So just the background, here's the Sabonic Neck, pre-development, but pre-golf course development, but you can see that there's plenty of development that was there from previous uses as a camp for the electrical union and so for other purposes. So the land area was in some cases being used fairly intensively by a lot of people. This is what the Sabonic Neck looks like now, with the development of the golf course in the center area here. This is the national golf course off to this area here. This is pretty much a dividing line. You can see the groundwater monitoring wells. There's 7 groundwater monitoring wells presently that encircle the top of the landmass of the Sabonic Neck. These are the ponds that are over here. So this is the irrigation pond we're talking about, and then the green drainage pond over here. This is the groundwater table map that we did in our first technical review. The groundwater contours are shown here in feet above mean sea level. This is 10 feet above mean sea level. The groundwater flow is perpendicular to these contours. You are very familiar with coastal water eutrophication and watersheds. These black lines show the approximate watershed lines to Peconic Bay. So for just the Sabonic area, 59% of the managed turf area goes to Peconic Bay. Only a small portion goes to Bullhead Bay, and 34% goes to Cold Spring Pond. And we'll be coming back to that in a subsequent slide. This is the table. This is like the Bible, the Rosetta Stone of the monitoring plan for 2013, where we ended up. It lists the wells that are being sampled, whether they're the classification, whether they're turf wells or non-turf wells. I'll tell you about that in a bit. The lysimeters that are out there now, the devices to sample soil water in a shallow zone, and the ponds, the green drainage pond and the irrigation pond. And it's basically how often is it sampled, and what its goals are, and resampling thresholds and thresholds for management responses as well. So let's start off. The monitoring plan has many requirements for the reporting of many of the parameters for operation and maintenance. And these are some of the things that Dr. Petrovic looks at annually for the annual review. And this is the irrigation in million gallons per year. The irrigation amount is fairly stable when you consider it ranges between 22 and 24 million gallons per year in the playing season. Some years with more rain, the amount of needed irrigation is less. Some of the things that are reported, that Garrett Boddington, superintendent, reports to Marty: precipitation, the calculations of evapotranspiration. And so here we have in precipitation, every monthly readings and the calculation of the evapotranspiration. All this information gets put together to develop a comparison between the amount of irrigation that the course is providing in inches and the amount of evapotranspiration or deficit that would be required, could be required by that. And what we see is in each case with the blue line irrigation being less than the ET demand is that the Sabonic golf course is keeping up with its management of turf by supplying the amount of irrigation that's below. So they're not being excessively irrigating this course at all. So it's recommended that all these records that get put together be condensed and put into potentially a digital form. Well, when we look at PDFs spanning 5-6 years of data and put it together, it's just basically a reporting courtesy we're asking for reporting digital some of this information digitally as well. So in bottom line, what our recommendation is the amount of irrigation is within the measurement requirements of the evaporation rates, and thus the Sabonic golf course not over irrigating and therefore is protecting water quality. Fertilization. This graph shows the amount of fertilization actually over the course of its time since we started. Remember what our period of review is these years through 2011 through 2018. So you see the flexibility, the variation of fertilization. I think you may recall there was a big PGA event that happened at Sabonic, the ladies PGA tournament. So maybe some more aggressive types of turf management were happening over that period of time. But overall, the average application is is about 5,000 pounds per year, and that is right within the approved turf management plan. So we recommend that the Sabonic golf course can continue to maintain these amount of turf and to maintain its to apply the amount of fertilizer to manage turf is going well, as long as they can maintain the 2 parts per million goal that we have, and I'll talk about that a little bit. That's the overall nitrate nitrogen goal for the course is the no greater than 2 ppm, and they are keeping that. So there was a previous recommendation in our last review that they look at considering a reduction of the amount of fertilization, but this is showing that they can maintain what they're putting in. It's underneath the approved integrated turf management plan, and we see that it is not impacting groundwater. The golf course as had is part of its condition was a greens drainage system. So the greens are often looked at as a more intensive managed parts of the golf course. So in this case, green drainage system was put in underneath all the drains, underneath all the greens to go to the drainage pond that I pointed out. So this means the fertilizer, pesticides, rainfall, irrigation water it's not leached down to groundwater, but it goes over into the green drainage pond. And there was a requirement for a test of that was undertaken in 2015, and they found that of the amount of irrigation water applied, that it was performing fairly well, capturing 65 to 93% of the amount of water. We want to, our recommendations is that they continue to do drainage performance tests every 2 years, and we have a more detailed prescribed strategy and protocol that has been adopted in the or included in the updated groundwater monitoring plan for 2021. And then it's also, there's a number of dry wells out there that's basically like a catch basin for drainage that you see alongside, many cases alongside various different developments elsewhere. And this basically takes the excess water and puts it through a dry well when it's needed. And many of these are covered up and not used. But in cases where there's a excessive rain, a number of these can be opened up to rid the course of excess water. And we are recommending a sampling of the dry wells with water in it during that period when that happens. Once at least in a 5-year duration. So what about the groundwater monitoring results? The updated groundwater monitoring plan requirements. So there's currently 7 active monitoring wells, 4 lysimeters, the 2 ponds, and the irrigation well. They're sampled biannually, that's twice a year, by an independent firm, WSP. They go out and they sample the wells, and the green, and the wells are divided up into 5 turf wells. So 7 of those we have characterized as being responsive to the management of turf. That you can see potential increases, decreases of nitrogen from fertilizer. That's our big gold pot here about the monitoring plan. Is we're if we can monitor and look at the impacts of nitrogen from fertilizer, well, that's about 80% of what we need to do here, and certainly pesticides as well. But anyway, and we have the 5 turf wells and 2 non-turf wells, and those actually seem to be measured where they replace the impacts from the pre-existing development. And so we'll be talking about that a little bit more. Sometimes you put these wells in, you're not sure exactly what you're going to capture. But over a period of time that we have had here, we can say, hey, these are turf wells, and these other wells aren't really telling us much about the golf course management itself. But some important data just the same. So the goal of the turf wells is 2 milligrams per liter. That's our goal for the golf course, for the potential impact from turf management, no greater than 2 milligrams per liter. If we find that the concentration is greater than 4, well, then there's a management response, and that has only happened twice. The non-turf wells, because they have a different impact, and in many cases really high, the goal is higher at 5, and the management response is at 10. And then the ponds are also have a goal of 2 with a management response of 4, and the lysimeters have a higher goal as well.
I have a quick question. Back on that previous slide, if you could just, do you mind going, okay, so is 2 milligrams per liter the same as 2 parts per trillion, 2 parts per million?
Yes, you're right. That is true.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, put it in perspective, the state and federal drinking water standard is 10 parts per million or milligrams per liter. A lot of our local regulations, have grasped that a land use nitrogen loading impact of no more than 5 parts per million or milligram per liter. So 2 is really low. It's almost tantamount to 4-acre zoning or something like that for residential development.
Thank you. Yeah, I just couldn't do the conversion math in my head. Thanks.
You're welcome. So I'm not going to go through all these graphs. Don't worry. This is basically shows the type of information that we have to compile in order to come to our conclusions. So like this well here, number 1 is a non-turf well, and you can see the numbers of measurements that are taken early on in the course. We were doing quarterly measurements. In 2013, we said we don't really need quarterly. You can do it biannually. So that changes up. And this is a turf well because look at this concentration of nitrogen. It's really high starting off. The nitrogen concentrations are in blue, okay? And so blue for each graph. These are really high, but the turf wells you can see are really, really low. We're less than, probably 3 in here. This one is around 1.5. Here we are starting at 3, and we're down around 1. 6 is also down around 1. 7 is a newer well that was put in 2013, and that is also around 1. So those turf wells have really a low level of impact. If you look at the blue lines, here's another non-turf well that started up around 12 from the pre-existing development, but has been coming down.
Can I interject one thing for the councilman's kind of question? The other thing, the 2 milligrams per liter or parts per million, milligrams per liter, that's a scientific version. But that meets, there was a goal set by the Peconic Estuary for golf courses of golf courses can meet or be less than 2 milligrams per liter. So that's the goal we've introduced in all these golf courses that are being monitored, that they should be able to meet that. And that you can see they've been able to do that.
Thanks, Marty. So we take all those measurements and put them collectively together on a graph. This is what the turf wells look like. You can see this number 5 well, starts increasing fairly dramatically. And around this period of time, we had recommendations to undertake some management actions. And so this one has really come down really nicely. There's one in here. Here's well 2 that's moving along here fairly nicely at 3, but has some interesting back and forth. And we look at that and we say, well, Garrett's doing some turf modifications, moving some of the fairways from one end to the other, not end to the other, but from marginally actually. So that often ends up releasing organic nitrogen that's in the soils and that. So we could tell a lot by looking at these, and if we put them all together and average them, we can see what the averages are in a numerical sense here. These are the turf, here's all the independent wells. And if we put it all together, the average for our period of record here is 1.45 parts per million. And then for the non-turf wells, it's about 6.5 parts per million. And you can compare that to what it was in our first review, that the concentration, the average concentration has really gone down here from when it first started to this last review. Similarly, for the turf wells, they've gone down as well. Specific inductance, on the other hand, which I'm going to talk about more detail, has gone up almost double in the turf wells from 120 to 224, but as kind of moderated in the non-turf wells.
And that's salinity, correct?
It's a measurement for salinity, yes. It measures the abundance of dissolved ionic species like sodium and chloride, and the more of those you have, the greater of the electrical current it supplies when you put in these electrodes. And so the higher the number, the more of the dissolved ionic substances, or like sodium or chloride or nitrate or calcium and things like that. So our turf response well, if we look at the average, put all those things together, and we've got a decreasing nitrogen concentrations on this course. And so, one of the reasons is, the primary reason is because the course is managed very well, just as much nitrogen as it needs to have good playing turf. But the other is that we had some pre-development impacts that are actually kind of being remediated by the use of the land as a golf course. So it's kind of an interesting story here that we have that we can read into these nitrate concentrations going down. Compare it to the bridge course, and that was a golf course developed where there was nothing before except a roadway, and we had some increases. So if you look at the long term, there's been a slight increase in that one. And the Sabonic, it's gone down. And we've looked at a number of parameters of this. We've looked at Marty, we looked at what? Precipitation, fertilizers, all types of things, but we found that the closest correlation was with of fertilizer average concentration was with precipitation. So higher levels of precipitation, we saw higher levels of nitrate. So that might just be the case that, you know, when it rains more, it leaches a little bit more nitrate into the ground. But overall, again, our average at 1.45, these concentrations are really low from 2005 to 2018. And again, they're going down. This is a frequency diagram of all our samples, 89 samples, and 36 are below 1. And the bottom line is that only 2 of 89 of the turf wells were above the 4 milligram per liter sampling threshold. These 2 here, and those were the areas that abutted where there was some turf management alterations going on. So they were ephemeral. They weren't last long. So we had a number of monitoring requirements that get kind of into some details here. We want to continue to monitor the non-turf well 1 for its to monitor the restoration of groundwater from the previous impacts. Reclassify one of the wells, MW3, as a turf well. These wells have been in the ground for a long time. They're sampled by balers, by baling them with a baler on a string. It causes sedimentation in them. So we want these wells to be redeveloped. We wanted the golf course and the consultants take a look at the sampling method. And overall, it's recommended that we continue to keep the collective average concentration goal of 2 ppm for the turf wells. We've looked at the pond data as well, and the pond data for nitrate is really low. It's less than 0.5. It's almost below the detection limit for the greens, for the irrigation pond and the greens pond. Except this one case here. I don't know if this is an outlier in what happened with sampling or the lab, but it's also that around that period of time where they had the PGA tournament here, so potentially there was a more aggressive turf management going on that was picked up here. But in any regard, there was been very low. It didn't exceed the threshold. And so we recommend the continued measurements of field parameters and pesticides annually for the greens and irrigation pond. We mentioned the lysimeters. These are little devices that are put into the shallow soil beneath the turf, at different depths, 3 feet or 6 feet or 9 feet. And we measure soil moisture, and they were put in to help us evaluate evaluate potential impacts. And of the goal for the lysimeters is an action goal of 5 ppm. No, a goal of 5 ppm to keep them less than 5, and an action threshold of 10. And you can see that, for the most part, these concentrations are below 5. In some cases, we had an action threshold exceeded here at 10, and then, the action was to resample it. It came in at 10, but then it dropped right back down. And then there's lots of variation in some of these lysimeters as well. And overall, of the 120 samples that have been taken, 92% are below the action goal, and 80% below 2 parts per million. So these lysimeters are basically not showing us much of the impact as we are, and in the time frame are not proven not that useful for turf management. So our lysimeter findings and recommendations is the lysimeter network is over 15 years old. These lysimeters are extremely sensitive to air leaks. because you have to sample them with air pressure, and so many of them have become inoperable. And over the course of the project, we've abandoned a number of these lysimeters. So, presently of the 2012 monitoring plan, the 4 sets of lysimeters in the plan, only 3 are operational. So we've recommended that the lysimeter testing can be discontinued since many of them become inoperable. The soil water nitrate concentrations are below the action. And after 13 years, the data is not really being used as a management tool or management response. What we're seeing to make those decisions, and what Marty looks at annually, is the concentrations in the wells.
Yeah, just one comment. I mean, we originally put those in as an early warning system to see if we would pick up something that's 3, 6, or 9, or in one case 15 feet down versus the groundwater well itself. And they just are not serving that purpose. And this particular site too, groundwater is not that deep in some locations. And so they haven't been very useful in picking up what we hoped would be an early warning system. And therefore really they won't change the ability to determine the impact of this golf course. And it's probably not worth testing them anymore.
Marty, this is John Bouvier. I have a question, maybe a little bit out of the range of this particular slide, but the last time you gave us a report, since then we've implemented an IA system replacement to try to reduce nitrogen from some sanitary systems. Are you guys measuring that at all? Because we find with the county subwatershed studies that it's an accelerant in some cases. The whole idea to put the IA systems in the shorter travel times is because it increases it exponentially, the amount of nitrogen that gets into the subwatershed and ultimately into the aquifer. Are you guys thinking about looking at that, or do you measure that at all for the sanitary systems that are there locally?
I'll comment first, and probably Tom will add to it. We're not directly measuring it, but we are, measuring holistically the groundwater and over the whole golf course. And so that, it would have to probably put additional sampling in. And that we know that was monitoring well number 1 with the previous land use there. There were a lot of old septic systems there, and that still is showing high nitrate levels. But we haven't been directly, and would have to probably look at where those discharges are to see how close our monitoring wells are. And Tom, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'd say the objective of our the golf course monitoring plan is to evaluate those impacts from the turf management, the wastewater from the neck is certainly another issue, and dealt with under the aegis of different regulations than what we're looking at under the permit. It really wasn't an aspect for the groundwater monitoring plan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just interested, to see what the percentage of the contribution might be, and you'd be able to measure that, and also a way to encourage the golf course to put in, IA systems, because they are available, and it is a big reduction. We're just interested from the program standpoint to see, get some kind of metric, and this seems like a great place to get the metric. And looking at the numbers, the way they've gone from the last time you reported to now, to see if you've got a pretty good baseline there. And I don't know what what facilities are there and what the actual contribution would be, but I think it's something to consider, either as an incentive to put IA systems in. I know it's a long travel time, but even in areas that we found where we've had these travel times, 15, 20 years, was actually accelerated by sanitary systems, but nobody can really measure that. This seems like a great place to be able to do it. So I would just put that in your head and walk away. But it's I would encourage you to see if that's something that in the future we could use as a way for us to understand the impacts of IA systems as well as we evolve the program. But thank you for the answer.
John, if I could just add my 2 cents in there. Because Sabonic Neck is so isolated, you won't see any impact from IA systems off of Sabonic Neck. So it would just be related to what happens at the golf course facility itself.
Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, if you go back to Tom's slide where he shows the groundwater flows. There you go. There's no flow into Sabonic Neck from the mainland.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
No,
it's
I was
essentially an
thinking
island.
more- Yeah, no, I understand. I was thinking more as far as penetration to groundwater. You know, you're looking at surface effects and the amount of nitrogen to apply to surf and so forth.
Mhm.
But, you know, sanitary systems, even IA systems bypass that. And we're always trying to figure out how much of a contribution that really is in comparison to surface laid fertilizers and nutrients, particularly in agricultural areas and things like that.
Right, I understand.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, we have good information. This is the non-turf well that Marty referenced, and we think these concentrations were really high, over 10 milligrams per liter that have come down. And these were an area where that was developed. I think there was intensely. I think there might have been septic systems and things like that in this area. So we're seeing a restoration over time from the abandonment. And I'm not really sure what the infrastructure is for wastewater and how that's dealt with on Sabonic Neck. I know that our wells aren't intercepting it, other than this one non-turf well.
Yeah, it's hard to measure because we have an issue when the county is doing the measurement of the performance of the new systems. If it's raining, there's a different measurement, and to try to separate out those two sources sometimes becomes problematic. So it's just kind of interesting to try to understand what's happening with runoff versus what's happening with any kind of system that puts it beyond the turf line. So it's an interesting. Anyway, I didn't mean to hijack the meeting. Thank you.
No, it's a difficult problem to try to measure and calculate and quantify non-point source impacts. And it's basically what we're spending a lot of time doing, measuring the non-point source impacts from turf management, and trying to do it over a broader area with septic systems is, I think it may be even a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. We looked at salinity. I talked a little bit about the specific inductance that's measured as a matter of sampling protocol through the updated groundwater monitoring plan. So the irrigation well was an area that was supposed to be conceptually was supposed to be being measured, and we didn't have that measurement, but we looked at the specific inductance in the irrigation pond and the green drainage pond, and we found that the average concentration is about almost about 1,200 for the irrigation pond here. So it's a fairly high. Now the specific inductance in comparison to seawater is about 50,000 microsiemens. That's a measurement of electric current, and so at a level of about 1,200, it's well below that of seawater, but it is quite elevated. Natural unimpaired groundwater will have a specific inductance measurement of about 100 microsiemens, somewhere down in here. So when we looked at this information, we said, geez, we do have a little bit of concern here about the concentration, about the specific inductance, and potentially is it pointing to some type of a potential seasonal saltwater intrusion from the irrigation well. So one of the other things we did is specific inductance is measured every time we sample one of the wells out there. So in the turf monitoring wells. As we looked at the average nitrogen concentrations, we could look at the average specific inductance. So for the monitoring wells, we started out pretty low at about 50 to 100, and now we're up near around the average is around 225. With some fluctuations that occur naturally, but these concentrations are going up. We just got the measurement. The WSP folks went out this December to do their measurements, and the turf well specific inductance average is about 335, so somewhere up in here. So these specific inductance are high enough to be considered moderate impact for a golf course. And so it's not known if the groundwater from the irrigation well is a potential source increasing the total dissolved substances, or if the irrigation pond is accumulating substances of runoff over time. In a period of time, since we came up with a report up to 2018, we have been doing back and forth, and Marty has been doing his annual reports as well. And so we've actually asked for measurements of chloride in the irrigation pond, and they're pretty high. One was up to nearly 700 parts per million. And then Paul and working with Garrett at the course, we're able to mobilize and take some grab samples of the irrigation well, and the irrigation well shows that the concentrations are below about 35 parts per million. So we have this situation that the irrigation pond is really high, and we don't really have measurements from the well itself, because and actually that was something that was implemented post our review and in our discussions with putting a sampling tap on the irrigation well, so controlled samples can be taken from it. And that was part of our recommendation. It was recommended that specific inductance to irrigation well be measured at least monthly. Potential consideration for the development, the deployment of a data logger, and also test the irrigation well once a year in the fall prior to shutdown for general inorganic concentrations. And this was our initial recommendation, and the work and the back and forth that we've been having with Sabonic and Paul and Garrett is that we've got to a place where the 2021 updated groundwater monitoring plan includes weekly measurement of specific inductance in the irrigation well during the playing season, monthly measurements of chloride with a trigger of 100 for increased sampling to go to weekly, the installation of a specific inductance data logger in an adjacent monitoring well to be downloaded during sampling events that WSP comes down. They can download them and also take measurements of specific inductance and chloride for calibration in the well and the irrigation well too. And then we also recommended annual sampling of pesticides and organic chemicals, as we indicated above. So we think that's will provide the information that can be evaluated as we move forward in regards to this. I will say that in a lot of the work they've done out in Truro and on the Cape and dealing with saltwater intrusion for public water supply consumption is that a poorly sited well can result in seawater intrusion. But in many cases, you see kind of a rebound during, we have seasonality up in there, just as the golf course is seasonal pumping. So there is a kind of a recovery that has been proven to happen in regards to saltwater upconing. So it could be something that happens potentially through the playing season, and then when it's shut down in November, the groundwater lens comes back into equilibrium. So these are some of the things that we can conceive of. We know about the science, And now with these updated protocols, we'll have the information to better evaluate that.
I think that's really great. You know, we are experiencing as a municipality some drinking wells that are no longer usable. We have wells, you know, along the coastline. Obviously, with sea level rise, we're getting a lot more saltwater intrusion than, and it continues to go. It's just kind of interesting in this case that you're seeing that. This is good. I'd like to. That's good data to have.
And one of the other aspects of this that we're concerned about is that as that salinity level goes up, it does start impacting the growth and health of the turf that's there. Which, if it starts doing that, then the turf grass system is not as effective at tying up nutrients and degrading pesticides. But we're probably not there yet. But that's one of the kind of long-term concerns. If those levels keep getting higher and higher, what's going to be also the impact on the turf, which can impact groundwater quality.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you, Marty.
And I was glad in our discussions with Paul Grosser and the updated groundwater monitoring plan that he included a lot of the background information about the well, about how it was permitted, about the subsurface geology of the Sabonic neck as well. You know, after all, it is a small little groundwater lens there in the upper aquifer, and that's it wouldn't surprise me if that's what was happening. But then it's like we need the data to manage that and to know better how to manage it. Well, then we'll get on to pesticides. It's often the most scariest part about citizens for golf courses, and the work that groundbreaking work that Marty's done in looking at golf courses and being able to sort out toxic, the most toxic, most mobile pesticides, and using those that could do the most good for the least harm is the rule, I guess. And these are the approved pesticide hit lists that we have in the course in 2011, and the amount and frequency of pesticides that is applied is overall conservative for a caliber of this caliber of a golf course, and is in range of standard practices for the golf courses. All the information that's applied from Garrett was evaluated, compiled to see how much is actually put in, applied to the course. So over 1,000 to over 2,000 gallons per year are applied to the fairways. It says but 80% of this was mineral oil. That was one of the good recommendations from Dr. Petrovic in turf management. So of these pesticides, ones that were applied in at any time in more than 100 gallons per year were for these 6 pesticides here. And you can see a couple of these graphs show just by an example of the pesticides applied in the year and which ones. There's also pesticides that are applied in pounds per year, or reported in pounds per year, and these are from 100 to 750 pounds per year of these particular pesticides were applied at rates of more than 100 pounds per year.
So I was interested to see that mineral oil is considered a pesticide. It seems so benign. Can you explain why that's considered a pesticide?
Well, anything that claims pest control is considered a pesticide. And in this case, yeah, it's interesting that it acts by kind of faking the plant out that it's being attacked, so it builds up its resistance. And so it's almost like getting a vaccination in a sense. And so it is relatively benign, but when you claim pesticide properties or pest control properties, then falls into that category as a pesticide.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
These are all of the pesticides that are applied to the greens, tee boxes, and fairways, right? Does this include pesticides that are applied for tick control and in and around the club? Permethrin, chrysanthemum oil, and synthetic.
There hasn't been much of an insect pest problem on the course in general. They've tolerated some minor grub damage and chinch bug damage and whatever, but the tick issue has certainly been increased significantly, and last year was very problematic. And so so these really reflect the stuff that's applied kind of only turf related specifically. But I know they have developed a tick management plan that does involve some pesticide use. And that's been part of one of the reviews that was put forward.
It was reviewed, is that what you just said?
It was, I reviewed it as part of their annual program. And therefore they're looking potentially, if the levels are high, to be able to treat. But all the ones that are listed here have been primarily greens, tees, fairways, and a little bit of roughs. And not specific. All those are, almost all are either fungicides, a few herbicides, but there are no insecticides on that list.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was always an amazing part for me. I don't deal too much pesticides, but to find out that it's really not insecticides. It's for fungi for the most part, and the herbicides that are mostly applied. We also broke this out in the pesticides applied to the greens and tees, and that's was 25 to 100 gallons per year. Again, 60% of it was mineral oil. There were 8 pesticides that were applied in amounts of greater than 15 gallons, and those were the pesticides listed here. And you can see the pesticides. This is by pounds over here. That 3 different pesticides were applied from 225 to 450 pounds per year. And those were these 3: chlorothalonil, vinclozin, and paraclostrobin were used on the greens. So it's again, it's the annual reporting, that makes a difference. That we're not just looking at the pesticides in the wells, but we know exactly what's being applied to the course. And these are very detailed reports that the superintendent provides, and that Marty meticulously goes through every year. So what were detected in groundwater? So we had during this review period, pesticides were seldom detected in the monitoring wells. No detections were above the action thresholds. As a matter of fact, these are the pesticides of the pesticides applied on the course. These are the pesticides that showed up during this review period. Nine occurrences, and the concentrations are all below 1 part per billion. So microgram per liter, parts per billion, a very low amount. So the turf management program and pesticide risk assessment adopted through the 2013 updated groundwater monitoring plan is functioned as anticipated to rule out more persistent mobile pesticides that were more likely to cause groundwater contamination. Then we also looked at pesticides detected in the pond water. 9 pesticides were detected in the greens drainage pond. Kind of makes sense that would have the highest number of detections. It's where the greens have the drainage to it. 3 pesticides were detected in the irrigation pond. Again, all these detections were below 1 part per billion. So 4 pesticides that were not applied to the golf course. And then that's period. Detections were low. And this other case that we continue to be dealing with in the detections is 4 pesticides that were not applied to the golf course were detected in groundwater monitoring wells. And these included these several compounds right here. And this was the whole issue that Marty was able to detect, that imported sod emplaced in 2018 and 19 was the source of these outside pesticides. So we had these pesticides showing up in the monitoring wells, but with no record of them being used. So what's going on is we've got an outside source of pesticides coming in from uncontrolled sod, and so recommendations were developed that anytime sod is brought in from outside, that pesticides were used to grow it, that those pesticides need to be identified, and the list of those pesticides given to the sampling crew so that they can include them as new pesticides for testing and reporting. Another is only sod from Long Island farms should be used, since sod from New Jersey or someplace like that, who knows what regulations they have that aren't registered for use on Long Island. And if pesticide application history is unavailable for sod, that we actually recommend that the sample be frozen and given to the monitoring staff to be tested for a comprehensive list of pesticides, so we know that we can tell what was potentially used in it.
Yeah, we have chain of custody laws on things like that too. I'm wondering if that applies, and I applaud you doing that, because I hear these horror stories of some of the chemicals that sod farms are using in different places. So, is there such a thing as the sod farm certifying itself, and then
That it appears to be unlikely. And what the issue is, 3 of the 4 pesticides that we found are legally registered for Rhode Island, for New Jersey on sod production, but not on Long Island. They also are registered for the rest of New York State. So they're quite commonly used. And this has been one issue. We've been trying to get be able to get more information from the sod growers, but they have fields. Many of them, even Long Island growers, have fields in New Jersey and some in Rhode Island or Connecticut, and that's where the dilemma is. It's hard for them to. You would think they'd be able to track it better, but they claim it's difficult for them to know exactly where it came from. So to the point that either you bring in, only use Long Island sod, which can be done in most cases, or in this case, Sabonic does have its own kind of sod nursery. So if they need to use stuff from that's been damaged, they have it on site, and we'll get around this problem. But if they can't either get information from the sod grower and it's not from Long Island, at least we can test it to see what's there. And the other interesting thing about it, that this shows how rigorous the groundwater monitoring program is, to pick up small areas that were sodded, end up showing pesticides that end up in groundwater, which to me shows how effective this groundwater monitoring program actually is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know if there's any state initiatives to apply some kind of control or a way of monitoring that or preventing that from happening. I like the idea of local growth, particularly related to this golf course. It's a much bigger problem, obviously, but that's interesting. Thank you, Marty.
Okay.
And just on this first recommendation, where that there's new pesticides being developed that are better for the environment, and it says you'll remove any currently used pesticide if it does not have a low FEIQ. Would there be, like, if you approve a new one that's better for the environment, you definitely take off another pesticide, or will this pesticide list keep growing as long as everything is kind of okay for the environment, which kind of sounds weird to say that pesticides are good for the environment. But I'm just wondering, when you find a new pesticide, can you then definitely take off an older pesticide?
I'd hate to categorically say yes, because partially there are 2 issues. One, there's does it perform as a pesticide? it safe in the environment? And the other kind of caveat is that there is a lot of resistance that develops with pesticides. And you want to be able to use, especially with fungicides, you want to be able to use a material that's from a different resistance class and rotate those so that resistance doesn't happen. Because once you get a pesticide resistant organism, it's very, very difficult to control with other ones that you would think would be easy to control. So that's why I'd hate to categorically say yes, depends on the material. But I think removing, and as the original ones that were screened and ones that were added have gone through risk assessment to try to show they won't cause an impact to groundwater quality, and the monitoring seems to support that. But I'd hate to just categorically say if a new one comes on to get rid of one, unless if there isn't any alternative to that, then you would maybe need to keep it. But they're usually more than one fungicide in a given class, and there is probably as many as 10 different classes that could potentially be used. But it does get narrowed down, and I just hate to put everything at risk with pesticide resistance.
Understood. I just it's concerning to me just to have a continuously growing list of pesticides. So when ones that don't work as well can fall off, I think that's a good thing. But then again, I don't manage turf, so.
I mean, I agree with the concept. I think it is a case by case situation.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Well, I think with that discussion, we've hit that first bullet. That's part of our recommendation, and then also that we recommend annual testing of the irrigation well for pesticides to evaluate any potential internal cycling, since we had some pesticides showing up in the irrigation pond that potentially be added to the data that we're accumulating on the irrigation well and its relationship to the groundwater. And then the other thing, the other things that we looked at, for coastal water is, this is a graph showing measurements of total nitrogen in Cold Spring Pond for a period of years that we're able to download. Oops. And the concentrations, pretty much we're going down. We have some little bit going up in 2016. I think this was a little bit of a extra rain, but we did a nitrogen load calculation for the watershed to Cold Spring Pond. Couldn't do it for Peconic Bay because that includes a lot of area, but for Cold Spring Pond, it was 34% of the watershed. 34% of the load potentially from the neck. So the watershed, all the development in the watershed accounts for almost 5,500 kilograms per year of nitrogen being generated in the watershed. The turf, the fertilizer management of Sabonic is only about 112 kilograms contribution. So it's only 2% of the watershed load to Cold Spring Pond, and at that rate, you're not going to see any potential changes by what's going on in Sabonic versus elsewhere in the watershed that has significant development and wastewater impacts. And then the other issues that there was anecdotal evidence that the tick population has risen dramatically. Staff complained about many tick encounters. Several developed Lyme's disease. So we have a recommendation that the golf club work with entomologists at the Cornell and Suffolk County Department to develop tick management plan. If pesticides are involved, risk assessments must be done, just like it was for the turf to determine the risks to groundwater quality before application and pesticides added to the groundwater monitoring protocol. And then also annual bluegrass from the inception. Golf course has been eradicating annual bluegrass has been a high priority on greens hand weeding as well as plugging have been done to keep the bluegrass population very low but acceptable. It's recommended that the golf club could develop a comprehensive long-term annual bluegrass control plan before negative effects of annual bluegrass impact on water quality. And those aspects have been included in the updated groundwater monitoring plan. And other reporting, I've mentioned several times that there's a huge amount of information that's reported both biannually, annually to the town and to Marty to look at. And so we have a whole list of things that are included in these specifications, and I won't go through them all, but that we have all these that reporting and knowing the operation and maintenance goes hand in hand with evaluating the scientific monitoring data in the wells and the ponds and the irrigation well in this case too. And that is all been put together in this new table proposed for your consideration for approval at your next meeting. This is the 2021 sampling program. So it's been updated with the turf response wells, adding the well number 3. There's only one turf response well now. The lysimeters and ponds that we're basically discontinuing those. We're continuing with sampling of the greens pond and the irrigation pond. And then we have a whole new row of requirements for sampling the irrigation well and the dry wells. And then we have a number of footnotes under here as well. And so we've developed these in the interim period since we initially came out with our report to try to get these recommendations of to get the updated groundwater monitoring program proposed for 2021 in sync with the recommendations in our report. And that ends our presentation for this work session.
All right, thank you. That was extremely comprehensive. I have a question regarding the liners. This is a Sabonic as opposed to where you monitor up at Golfit Bridge. I think this is the only course that has the vinyl lined greens. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I guess my second question will be about the integrity of those liners, but I just want to sort of know whether it's working, does it have a measurable impact in reducing groundwater contamination or no?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, we see that, that they've been pretty good at keeping pesticides out of groundwater and keeping nitrate levels down. And our other version of this will be trying to compare it to the bridge, but the site conditions are certainly different. It may be a bit hard to do, but I mean, that's been one of my concerns. I mean, they're in there and are they functioning? So we added this testing protocol to make sure they are. The thickness of the liner should last 50 to 100 years. So unless something perforates it, they're likely to be intact for a long time. They have put on timers on their because most of those greens are drained into a sub-catchment basin and pumped up to the greens drainage pond. And so you can record the time it took to pump it, and knowing the pumping rate of the pump, you can figure out how much water is being put on. So now they have those installed, and we'll get a better picture of, are they really working? And if they stop working for some reason, some group of greens stopped producing drainage where the rest of them are. So if are they effective? That to me is it's a good question. There's not very many examples in the whole U.S. of having liners under greens. There's one on Cape Cod is the other one. I think it adds a layer of protection. Just the greens tend to be more heavily managed.
Right. So that's sort of the theory, is that these greens are where the more toxic chemicals are applied in an effort to keep them perfect. But then we put these liners in, which is supposed to catch anything. Although I know a lot of these chemicals are supposed to be bound into the soil anyway, but or not persistent. But then they get to the liner and then they're pumped into an irrigation pond, and that irrigation pond then gets pumped throughout the course, doesn't it? So,
Correct.
so we're actually then taking the chemicals that would have only been on the greens and we're sort of spraying them everywhere potentially. So could it actually be a negative thing or?
Well, if we,
I think, Marty, if I could just clarify, I think the green, they empty to the green drainage pond. So that pond is separate from the irrigation pond, I believe. And so I think that is kept separate. So, you know, this.
But it is mixed in and used for irrigation. And the way I view it is when we've tested those greens drainage ponds, there's very little things in it. So that's kind of one part of the answer. But then if you're spreading it over 65 acres versus 3 acres, you're diluting anything that might even be in there further and allowing the biological and physical effects that degrade pesticides to occur too. So I think it's an interesting thing, interesting concept, and it's certainly the groundwater monitoring wells. If those greens were leaking, they would be much like the bridge greens, and we're in either case not seeing much ending up in groundwater. But how useful they are, I think that's still to be determined, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a costly step that they have to take to line the greens. I just want to make sure that it's having the intended impact.
Well, we know that it's not making it worse. So how much better is I think that's the debatable part. But it on paper it should actually be improving things, and overall Sabonic groundwater quality is as we saw looks pretty unaffected by the golf course.
Marty, if I could ask a question on that, because I'm curious, how does I know on the bridge we have the issue of like the chlorothalonol, and that doesn't seem to be a problem here. And does that have any?
Well, chlorothalonil at Sabonic is only used on the greens, and chlorothalonil at the bridge is used greens, tees, and fairways, more on greens. So there's difference between the two of them, and partly that it's probably good that it's only applied to greens, because then we can see if anything's happening with it instead of ending up in groundwater. So that there is the difference between the two that way.
Okay.
For these lined greens to function, it's all gravity fed from the bottom of the liner to a pond. So does each green have its own pond, or is there a centralized pond?
So the way it works is 15 of them, I believe, use gravity to go to a catch basin with a pump that has to pump it up to the greens drainage pond. 3 of them go by gravity that actually can go in the pond itself, but 15 of the greens have to be into a pumping thing. So it's a contained, in either case it's contained, it's piped and not perforated, and so it mostly, it's mostly by pumping, but it is a contained system going back to the greens drainage pond.
So the system itself has the potential to concentrate these chemicals in one place, the pond.
Correct. And that's why testing the pond is important, to see if that's happening. And there is a lot of biological and biochemical reactions that could be happening in the pond as well as physically. Pesticides degraded sunlight. So if you brought it back, put it in the pond, sunlight could be degrading it. There are a lot of microbial activity in ponds. The bottom has a lot of organic matter. They're settling over time. They're lined, so the ponds are not draining out, other than when they're pumped for irrigation. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of looped, somewhat closed system till you pump it back onto the golf course.
Right, but you're pumping it back onto areas that are not lined. So
that's true.
So anyway, I was curious.
Yes. I am too. I said I've been a student of this. This is the scientist hat I put on, and I agree. It's just nice to see how effective they are, and it's a little tough to tell. We know they're not making it worse, so that's the good answer.
Okay. Any other questions for the team? And I think I know I got a copy of the report, so hopefully everybody got a copy as well.
No, but thank you for the presentation. It's really comprehensive and very informative. So thank you guys very much. It's a lot of work there. I see. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
So we'll be putting on a resolution, for your consideration for the December 28th meeting to adopt these protocols and approve the plan. And I don't know if anyone from Sabonic wants to speak. Garrett Boddington is also on the line and stuff.
So we would be passing a resolution to modify the groundwater monitoring plan to incorporate the recommendations that we just heard.
That's right.
And just as a comment, they've incorporated all the recommendations that we recommended. So that's our kind of endorsement that they're doing what we actually think they should be doing.
Okay.
And we'll get a copy of, I think it was called the proposed sampling program that you had on one of your slides.
I think Sabonic had sent that in, but we can make sure that Kim and Janice have a copy to get to you.
I read through the one that Kim had forwarded to us. I didn't see that, but I'll take another look. Maybe it is in there.
Janice, does the Sabonic have to agree, or we can unilaterally amend the plan?
They do have to agree, and they are in agreement. And you can ask them here as well.
Because there was some increased frequency of monitoring, so there's obviously some increased costs associated with that.
Yeah, our report was prepared on behalf of Sabonic, and that's their Sabonic's plan. Yeah, it's been submitted to you.
Yep. So it all is aligned. In other words, we met on site and worked out any final concerns, and I think that everyone's aligned.
That's great. All right. Thank you, Janice and Paul.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and attending, and Tom and Marty as well.
All right. Thank you all.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
So while they exit, we're going to switch over to some updates. I know we've all been running around going to tree lightings and things like that. We also had I was at one where Councilman Martell was at over in Hampton Bays, which is very nice, downtown. I was at the windmill one as well. I think Councilman Bouvier and Councilman Schivoni were at that. It's really nice at the college. We had a housing lottery. I think it was yesterday. Yeah, just yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, that was for 5 different units, 1 home, non-age restricted with an accessory apartment in Sagaponic, and then 2 senior apartments in East Quogue and 2 in West Hampton area. And I think Councilman Schiavone was there and Councilman Bouvier was there with me as well. And we went through the 200 plus individuals who had their name in the bin. It was all run by Long Island Housing Partnership. They did a good job, I thought. And congratulations to those individuals who were among the low numbers there. And I think that's really it I have for updates. A lot of things are in the works, but in terms of updates at this meeting. That's about it. Do you guys have anything?
I got something.
All right, Julie.
So I had my Dark Skies meeting a day or a week ago. Janice Shearer and Mickey Chi from Code Enforcement were nice enough to attend the meeting. So we had talked about a lot of good things during that. Also, Dark Skies is looking to work with Connie Conway to maybe make some TV shows about light intrusion and dark skies and all that stuff. So I know that they're looking forward to that. We had an East Quogue CAC meeting last night. Talked about ongoing parking issues that the police department and code enforcement are working on. But also it was really good to see. It was great attendance. There were representatives from the Civic there, from Beautification there, also from a couple other community groups that have specific issues. So it was nice to see everybody come together, and they're looking forward to working together to help make East Quogue, a more lovely place to live. So it was nice to attend that. And that was my last one there. So it was good.
Oh, a little bittersweet.
Yeah. But I have a feeling that the new councilwoman will have some opinions on what's going on in East Quogue as well. So I think they're in good hands.
Well, isn't she the chair of the
Yes.
East Quogue CAC? Okay.
Yes. For another couple days, another couple weeks.
So obviously she'll be stepping down there, right?
Yes.
All right. Any other updates?
Now, you covered the housing lottery quite well. I don't know if you said this, but the names that were chosen are going to be in that order for 2 years. As more opportunities come forward, those names will be used.
But you can still put your name in if you're not on the list and qualify for, future opportunities. Anyone else? I know I saw Rick and I were at the Hampton Bays Beautification Association. They had their annual meeting, holiday party, very nice. I was over at the Lobster Inn. They honored Dr. Mikolos as their Person of the Year at Small Business Alliance. That was very nice as well. That was last Friday, for all the work that he did related to the pandemic. Anything else anybody wants to mention? I have some noise at my end. So, all right. Well, we have executive session. So let's see. For executive session, acquisitions and personnel, we'll do it by conference call. So I will make a motion to end our work session and go into executive session on those items.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Schiavone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. So, all right, this meeting is adjourned for